Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Thursday Catalyst meditation. This is our pre-meditation talk, and our subject today is going to be on the relational economy. And the question is, what the hell is a relational economy? And I realize that I've been working on this for somewhere around, off and on, for somewhere around 3 decades. And I've been pulling little bits out of here and pulling little bits out of here and learning something over this way and learning something over that way. And it's been sitting somewhere in my head and heart. And right now, as we are living on our planet, going around the sun at this point in time, all the factors are coming together, at least in my head. And I want to get that out to us as expeditiously as possible. So much of our trauma is connected to our economics and politics. So much of our economics and our politics are connected to the trauma, or the alleviation of the trauma comes from a new economics and a new politics. I want to talk a little bit about the problem. We don't want to dwell on the problem. Everything what you focus on gets stronger. However, if we don't focus a little bit on it, then what we wind up doing is either having very naive, unworkable solutions, non-solutions, I should say, or we wind up um, over-dwelling on the problem and over-dwelling on and not providing any real solutions. Basically, an economic system is supposed to provide um, the way for us to satisfy our wants and desires, our needs in a society, and do that in some kind of a system. Um, if you go to a traditional breaker school and you go and you take your first course in breaker economics, the first thing out of the professor's mouth is going to be that economics is the management of scarcity. And that's because that is their consciousness. Um, I and we are operating from a different kind of consciousness. The question is, instead of the management of scarcity, how do we manage abundance? The earth is fully abundant at all times. There's enough for all. There's always enough for all, but not if some parts of all want to take the abundance that should be for all. Um, so when we start looking at types of economies, we have exchange economies, gift economies, we can have spiritual economies, and a new type of economy I'm going to talk about in about 5 minutes, what I call the relational economy. And there are a number of different processes. The keeper process, a steady state process, and what I call the vortex economics. The vortex economics is like a tornado. How does it funnel goods, services, money, etc., at higher and higher levels? It's a very extractive economic system where the people who have power in the system, and by the way, when I say system, it doesn't matter whether it's capitalist or communist or socialist, they're all breaker systems. Okay. They're all trying to manage scarcity as opposed to manage abundance. Um, and this notion of funneling up is built into the system as though that is a good thing when there's no evidence that it actually is a good thing. Okay, one more thing I want to share with you along these lines is you've heard the notion of markets. And Commonway, these slides are way old. Um, Commonway has identified a number of different markets. One of them, okay, so the black market is both illegal and immoral. And when you think about black market, think about heroin sales, which is a multi-billion dollar industry in America. It's an industry that's so large that it actually changes the relationship of nations around the world. It is illegal, it is immoral, and it's thriving. Um, the next is the gray market, which is illegal, but it's either moral or at least amoral. When I was uh, doing the Three Valleys Project work, and I was having meetings in the evenings. Um, I would pay young girls to babysit children. Generally, I was paying them to babysit their brothers and sisters. Um, but um, I couldn't do that legally because the system required that all of them be, first of all, documented US citizens, and they weren't. That they all had to have these courses that they take at school and how to how to take care of your brothers and sisters, etc. So I wound up paying them, but I knew and they knew and everybody else knew that I couldn't pay them because that's they're in the gray market. Um, the white market is legal and is moral, or at least is amoral. It doesn't have anything to do with morality in either direction. The green market is legal and healing. It's something that actually is healing for the people involved, healing for the planet, healing for our relationships, etc. And then there's what I call the red market, hyper legal. The people who create the red market create the legal system. So it's always legal, even though it can be highly toxic and highly immoral. Um, None of them go to jail because they're all they're towing the line, but they create the line. Okay. And so um and I've lots and lots of examples of that, and I don't have time to go through them. If anybody actually needs any examples of what the red market looks like, um, I'll be glad to share that with you. I had one more line on there, and with regard to the red market, that's what most people think of when they talk about the economic system. But the other parts are very um, powerful, very well known, well thought out in the work situation, all around the world. We get to see that system in operation if you start paying attention to the economic system and not what the news is saying about the economic system. Um, uh, there are countries that call the gray market the illegal but moral market. the informal economy. So TINA standing for there is no alternative. And this is something that has been bouncing around for a while. And this is how people have been talking about late stage capitalism. That basically this is the only viable economic system that's on the planet right now, and you should get in line with it because there's not an alternative to this. Um, so it will. So the late stage capitalist system is going to take you over, and you should be okay with that. And even if you're not okay with it, it's still going to take you over because there isn't an alternative. So you really should get okay with this. And as I said, I've been to enough places on the planet to recognize that um, there are tons of viable alternatives to the current economic system. Some of them worse than the current system, but many of them really uplifting and have a lot of good potential to them. Um, and I realized that I've done lots of work along these lines, especially when I was doing this work in Sri Lanka and working with an organization, Sarvodaya, that was so large it could affect a new economic system. And I went back and looked at my notes that I had been the work I had been doing in terms of encouraging Sarvodaya to become the catalyst for a new economic system on that island, and then use that as the catalyst for a new economic system in other parts of the world. And so this was something we had been thinking about in terms of literally a world strategy that as an alternative to TINA. I came up with a term. Oops, wrong button. I came up with a term I called ALICE, a living, inclusive, conscious economy. That holds some of the key elements of how we need to think about an economic system. Just by, this is the consciousness part, just by saying it, that means that there is an alternative to TINA. There's an alternative to late stage capitalism. Okay. We just articulated the alternative. We can and if I have anything to say about it, we will be creating an economic system that is living and for the living, that is inclusive, and that is conscious. I've been calling this the relational economy. You can also call it the holonic economy, the economy of the whole, the economy that is benefiting all. So if we think about, and can you see my cursor that I'm moving around on the screen here? Okay. Um, so if you think about the existing system, think about Tina, you think about late stage capitalism and late stage communism. I can't tell the two apart very well. Um, the primary focus is on capital. For a relational economy, the primary focus is the web of life itself and what we do to enhance the web of life, enhance our part of it, but not at the expense of the other parts of it. And that's possible to do. What you'll wind up doing is increasing revenue flow, but slower than if your sole goal is to benefit a handful of people. Um, in the TINA system, the primary beneficiaries of that system are investors, are people who put money into the system, and what they get out of the system is money and a whole bunch of negative energy that they ignore because they don't think that it belongs to them. Um, so when you think about oil extraction, you extract the oil out of the ground and you burn it, and then you do work with that, and you get paid for extracting it, and you stick the money in your pockets, and then you buy real big yachts with it. Everything else about that system, the damage it causes to the earth, the damage it causes to our atmosphere, the damage that it causes to the destabilization of neighborhoods and communities, that all of that has nothing to do with the investors. The only thing that they are concerned about is how much money did I make? In the relational economy, the thing that you are focusing on is the relationship between all living beings. Now, that means that you look at things that like externalities in a different way. The primary goal of the breaker economic system is to make more money, even when the making of more money doesn't make any sense to the participants in the system. Having more money than any 1,000 people could spend in 10 lifetimes, just as long as your numbers are going up, then the system works. If the rest of the world is falling apart, as long as your bank account is bigger, you are a success in that system. We need to change that. And we need to change that to a particular goal and a vision. And that very particular goal and a vision is, how do we create a world that works for all living beings? If somebody has another goal, then they need to start articulating that right now. So we have that goal. We have a goal of a world that works for all. And that is how we judge the how well that system operates. There is a lot more detail here. We're not going to do that lot more detail right here. This is enough of a taste, I hope, for us to start the process of getting around and getting behind a vision that is in alignment with our consciousness, in alignment with life on our planet, and in alignment with our future. The system has to be a global system. Lots of folks talk about economics, but they're talking about a handful of people over here and a handful of people over here. It's got to work for 8 billion, and it can. And we can get there, and there are steps to getting there. there's an awful lot more to all of those uh, concepts. I put several packages together back when Sarvodia was looking for its next activities. And I wound up having a couple of really good conversations with Dr. Aryaratne around a concept that he called Artha Dharma. Artha Dharma translates to ethical economics. And the opposite of that is unethical economics. The he had some basic concepts that he talked about with regard to that. The main element of Sarvodia's economic system is no poverty, no affluence, or no extravagance. And he's saying that poverty and extravagance are the two sides of one coin, and we don't need the coin at all. That the basis of economics should be sharing, and we're sharing resources, sharing time, and sharing material. We should diminish the value of money and increase the value of the Buddhist concept of right livelihood. That the relationships between people are more important than relationships with money and even worse than money is corporations. He talked about spiritual economics, but we didn't talk that much about it. And he said that an economy should be based on real needs and real conditions and should be based first in agriculture. And I agree with that. It's like if you can't feed yourself, you need to be able to feed yourself. And he said that the economy should be based on full engagement, not full employment. And I was just watching before we got started a guy out on 14th Avenue. Well, I shouldn't pick on him. He's just like any of the other aimless, lost people in a society where people are needed less and less. And Ari said that the economic system should be a village-focused development, not individual-focused economics or corporate-focused economics, or that's what he said. And then I would add to that, and not the economics of the state either. And that the economic system should intensify natural processes, not diminish natural processes. And so he also said that there are 4 results or outcomes of economic happiness. And I may be butchering these terms here. The first one is Anana Sukha, which is earning enough. And enough doesn't mean as much as you possibly can. Enough may be different for different families, different people, different families, different groups, different neighborhoods, etc. But there is a concept, and it's called not enough. And not enough means you make bad choices. And then there's a concept of too much. You can have too much money. And when you do, you make bad choices. You just make a different kind of bad choice. Um, the second concept was avavaja sukha, and that is no debt. That debt shouldn't exist in a society. You may have some temporary debt, but the idea of carrying permanent debt of any kind is not part of his economic system. The third factor is called Bhoga Sukha, and that's having enough material goods, which means that if you're going to build a house, you've got enough of all the stuff that you need to build the house. Um, you have enough of the material stuff. If you're going to feed your neighborhood, you got to have enough food. The it's another kind of enoughness. And then the final result or outcome of economic happiness would be anatta sukha, which is having enough spirituality that your economic activity should be catalyzing your spiritual activity and vice versa, so that you've got there's a balance in your life. Remember I said that this is a system where enough means you don't have too little and too much. Is it possible to have too much spirituality? I asked him this question and he said no, but it's possible to spend too much of one's time in search of a state that is outside of one's experiences and in some way is otherworldly. That enough spirituality means that you live your 3D reality with a deep understanding that there's more to life than your 3D reality. And um, so I thought that was very helpful.
Yeah, I'm really glad to see discussion of this, especially the concept of a spiritually based economic kind of system, especially the way it's broken down. Because one of the things I've seen and have kind of felt limited in my capacity to do anything about is just how many people in our 100 years ago in an agrarian based economy, there were places and ways that meant most people could make a living. I mean, you didn't have to have a big education. If you had skill, if you had basic skill, basic knowledge, you were basically healthy. You could do farm work and there was plenty of it to do. You could find work. And I've just sort of watched in my lifetime, watched that just sort of disappear. And yet there's still people that don't necessarily have a lot of education, but are healthy and able bodied, are very capable of doing physical labor, which there's always going to be a need for. And they have no place. There's no place for them. And I'm watching one of my friends has a son here that fits in that category. And unfortunately, his due to some not good choices in his life, he has to be medicated, and he can't problem solve. So I have him come over and help me in the garden, and I pay him. I can't pay him a living wage, clearly, but I can give him extra money, um, and he's healthy. He has a degree in plastics. He can't keep that job because of his disabilities. He can't keep a job in the plastics industry because of his disabilities. And but he's healthy, he's able-bodied, he's very sweet-natured, but he has to be supervised. And it's like there's no place for him. I mean, I see him take job after job after job and get fired or let go, or god forbid quit. I mean, there's no place for him in this society. And
Uh,
yet, he's a worthy human being. I'm just seeing that, 100 years ago, he could have gotten work on a farm and would have been perfectly fine because there would have been other people around to help him supervise. He probably wouldn't have gotten himself in the trouble that resulted in the condition he's in the first place. And it's just it makes me sad. I do what I can to help him. I can't even give him a few hours. Oh, good. I give him the work I can give him, but I can't give him steady work. So it's just kind of extra money, but at least it does help.
I agree with all that. And I'm thinking about the situation when, even in the 50s and early 60s, in Camden, New Jersey had one of the highest per capita incomes in the country with no millionaires in it. They just people worked hard. You had the physical labor work. You could work in the shipyards. You could work at Campbell's Soup. You could work at any of the other industries that were around. You could go on the back when Philadelphia was a real port. You could go down to the the waterfront and just stand there, and folks would you could get on a work crew and you'd unload a boat, and at the end of the day they paid you,
Mhm.
and you did that as many days as you needed to support your family or whatever, and all that went away. Now, the idea was, as the labor intensive stuff went away, that people would be more skilled and would get higher jobs doing more meaningful things than, literally, toting bales of something or another. That's not what happened. For some of them they went up and some of them went sideways. And for literally the hordes of people who are like the guy that you just talked about. But then there are other folks. I mean, there are college educated folks. Let me calm down. They're college educated folks, and I'm watching them interviewing for jobs as baristas in the coffee house. And nowadays, the big coffee places are requiring college degrees because they can.
To
They-
make coffee?
yeah,
Jeez.
yep, yep. They are requiring college degrees to do something that you didn't go to school for. Um, and now I saw that they moved new equipment into Pete's Coffee House. Um, so that the people who are the human beings that are there have to do less and less with the production of your coffee. The coffee will be producing itself. Eh, The goal of the system is the benefit of the society, and they define the benefit of the society as making more money. And um, the entire the relationship between the economic system, the political system, the social systems, all these different systems, the relationship is simply everybody is engaged in this make more money for the investors, who are the only human beings in the process, and everybody else, you know, too bad, but yeah, you are um, just another externality. One of the things that I got, and it really took a while before when I first started going abroad, I was going to third world countries, where the systems are just so different from what we've got here. Um, I remember being in Uganda and seeing how traffic flowed or did not flow. And it's like, how can they do this? And it's like, you're looking at it the wrong way. With no system whatsoever, they can do it. You know, people get from point A to point B, and there's no system there, but they make the system up as they go along. Um, um, a couple of years ago, when I was in South Africa, um, and watching how people um, in the informal economy um, um, get their transportation needs met. Um, they are hitchhiking from one area to, well, hitchhiking, but it's a very formalized system. If you're going from this point to that point, you should be paying that person that picks you up X amount of money. And the people who are going to a particular area um, clump together so that the driver that picks them up will know that I'm carrying this many people in this direction. Um, and there's an area there's an area where people where they grow oranges. And so what you do is either you hold up a little bag of oranges so that you know that they'll know that you want to go to the orange area. Or you hold your hand out like this, like you're holding two or three oranges, and people know that this hand gesture means I want to go to the orange area. And I people will wind up figuring out what they need to do and doing it, and it works. Um, the place where it doesn't work is where the system tries to the breaker system comes in and inserts itself into the informal economy, and generally that doesn't work. There was a way that they would sort themselves out. Um, the guys who the folks who needed day labor and these guys the skilled ones went early. I mean, like early, like 5 o'clock in the morning. The ones with less skills, if when I went down the street and if I saw somebody at 8 o'clock, then they've got fewer skills and they're negotiating for less money. If they're standing on that corner at 10 o'clock, they
SOL for today.
and and then of course the do-gooders at City Hall said, well, we can help formalize this system. And everything they added to the system made it more complex and made it less free-flowing. And then they're requiring, oh, you got to prove that you're in the States legally, and you've also got to do such and such. And they just drove the entire system to a different corner. You know, like you can do all that stuff over here, but we need to have this as an informal system. I don't know what they're doing nowadays.